Ready. Okay, can everyone hear me okay and see the screen here? Awesome. So, hi everyone, welcome to the LiDAR training and radar annotation session. The goal of this webinar is to help everyone improve their accuracy and abilities, be able to turn in more perfect work, and to teach everyone how to annotate radar. We're going to discuss the flow for new scalers, the type of common mistakes and inaccuracies we see being made, the most critical errors to correct, radar annotation, annotating through the blind spot in 13 frames, review techniques you should be using to become as efficient and accurate as possible, and some rule clarifications. So first off, welcome to everyone, and especially to our brand new LiDAR scalers. I have a couple different tips and instructions for when you first get onto the platform. First off, I don't know if anyone has been having trouble getting their first task, but I have a link that you guys can always follow to grab a task to avoid other task types, which I'm sharing in the channel now, which you guys have all seen this link. Also, for any new scalers, please always ping me on Slack at Stu when you start your first task and when you're submitting your first task, so that I can make sure that you always get extra thorough feedback to help you learn and get even better very quickly. Also, for everyone, always read the instructions before starting a task, as there are specific instructions for each type of task. It is incredibly important that you know what you're doing. That's the number one way to avoid having your task accepted with changes or rejected, anything like that, is to actually know what you're doing, to know what the rules are for that task. It seems silly, but it's really important. And ask questions in the channels as they arise, so you don't waste time doing something that's actually incorrect. If you're not sure, ask in the channel and figure out the answer first. There are a lot of people there that are excited to help, that have been doing this for a long time, and they know what they're doing. They have a lot of knowledge to share. So for any new scalers, there are a couple of different task statuses that you can see in your LiDAR dashboard. After you submit a task, when you are working on a task, it will say pending. After you submit a task, I guess it won't show up before. After you submit a task, it will say pending. And then once someone is reviewing it, after they choose what happens there, it's going to be either perfect, accepted with changes, or fixable. So perfect means that there were no errors at all, and it was just submitted straight to us and to the client. That is incredible. Everyone should strive for that. It can be difficult to get to that point because there's a lot of learning to do, but definitely work towards perfect. Accepted with changes means that there were some errors in it, and the reviewer or someone in our office here made those changes, fixed it up, and then sent it to the client. Fixable means that there are errors or mistakes, but it's been returned to you with comments so that you can go in and fix those errors and then send it back to the reviewer, and then we can send it through. There's also always a weekly bonus for LiDAR, which varies every week. It's not always the same. This week, for every 5 tasks you submit, you get an extra $10, which is great. So if you submit 15 tasks, that's $30 extra in your pocket on top of your regular pay. And that is paid out at the end of every week with the payment. So that's this week for everything accepted or accepted with changes between January 29th and February 5th. We also are going to start using nicknames for each of the different LiDAR task types to make it a lot easier to discuss. So instead of saying 40 frame task, you can use the nickname Turtle. I have a whole list of nicknames here that I'm just going to send off to you so you guys can get an idea. So Nick is going to be sending it to you in just a minute. Then we can go over that again. Anyways. Yeah. Alrighty. Any questions on that new scalar flow and intro before we move on to the next part? From Nucleza, what is the name of SAC? So the channel, if you're already a LiDAR annotator, is LiDAR-annotators. And if you haven't been added, please message in the group. We can add you into that. If you're not an annotator yet, then you can message in the LiDAR-QA channel. Moving on. All right. So some of the common mistakes being let through, and there are a lot, but I'll focus on the biggest ones. First one is missing objects of all types. There are a lot of missing objects, sometimes far away from the self-driving car, sometimes really close to the self-driving car, which of course is of the most importance that you get those. It's really, really important that you find every object, and there is a really easy way to check if you've found every object, and that is looking through every camera view and every frame. So that means, so this is not an annotated task, but I'm just going to show you what that looks like. That means going into the camera view and, oh, this is oversized. So going into the camera view and just moving through every view. So when you have a fully annotated scene and you look around like this, you can tell which object doesn't have a cuboid around it. That's the only way. That's number one way. And of course, checking in LiDAR, in the LiDAR view. That's probably the number one reason for rejections or imperfect task is missing objects, because it's never something we can let go. Every single thing has to be annotated. Another one is incorrect cuboid sizing. So oftentimes, especially for vehicles, cuboids are too small and exclude important points like the side mirrors, bumpers, sometimes the tires if the cuboid doesn't go down far enough. It's really important that you include every relevant point for that object. So for stationary cars, always use the dense aggregated point cloud for sizing to make sure you don't miss any points. But we don't ever want to use aggregated point cloud for moving objects, because as you can see, the points could belong to different objects. All right. Now we can see here every single point. Make sure we're including the side mirror, the bumper, the tires. And then edit the placement. Also, another common error is incorrect labels, which is very easy because you have to do it at the very beginning. So just make sure you're always selecting the right label. Don't get careless and drop your mouse forever. Make sure you have the right one. I'm also going to show you a really easy way to check for that. All right, that looks like it's probably the parking meter there. So we're okay, we've got the side of the car. And we want to use our arrow key, change the angle slightly. Oh, it's being very slow. Boop, boop. Perfect. For the incorrect labels, there's an easy way to check that. And that is by using toggle label coloring. So if I drop some different cuboids of different types, make that a cyclist, make that an animal, got torso width pedestrian. You can tell what the label is by hovering over it, but there's an easier way to check, and I especially use this at the end of a task to make sure that everything is correct. You click toggle label coloring, and everything has a different color. So a car is always going to be red. You can see this is always going to be the color of torso width for cyclist and animal. And if you see something that, if the torso width is this size, if you see a box this large with this color, you know it's wrong because torso width is never going to be that size. And if you see a little tiny red box, that's also incorrect because the car will never be that size. And we have a color key that I could send over to you guys to for you to know exactly what color each label is. Also, something worth noting is that you can't edit when you're in toggle label coloring. So if you're having trouble, you can't drop a cuboid, you can't edit a cuboid, you might have that on. Something that hopefully will be changed in the future, but like that for now. Other errors would be missing stationary cars at the edge of the scene, something that using aggregated point cloud is very helpful for. So let's see if we can find a good example. All right. First off, when I'm trying to find objects and there's other stuff in the way, I go in and use the filter max height here. So that gets rid of the stuff that's higher up, like trees that are in the way here. Moves them away so it's easier for me to find an object. And then I'm going to turn on aggregated point cloud. So now I can see all of the cars that are over here so much more clearly than before. Let's do this. So it's this car right here. So if you aren't using aggregated point cloud, you might not be entirely sure, but when you have it on, you can clearly see it. All of these guys down here. That's the best way for checking and finding distant vehicles. Oop, there it is. Mm-hmm. Other things include inaccurate pathways that don't actually follow and contain the object. So sometimes people get careless when they're continuing pathways and they don't actually make sure that the cuboid is over the points before they click enter to move to the next frame. So please make sure that you're actually following the cuboid and the object, and you've contained all of its points. Not deleting frames with 0 to 4 points in admin checks, that's a really easy one that always pops up here in the admin checks. You can just go click on it and delete it. Don't have any of those here, but there. Check cuboids with few points. We'll then check that in the scene. Sometimes it takes a minute to load, or a few. So it doesn't work for me either, but you guys get the idea. We're still always working on it.
Really are.
Pedestrians being marked stationary is another error. They should not be marked stationary. They pretty much never stand perfectly still. They're always moving a little bit. So please just complete the pathway all the way. If you know that they literally are not moving at all, you can copy position / yaw to this frame, backwards, forwards. And this will put it in the same position for every frame. But please be very careful with this because you can't undo that, and it's going to be the same in each frame. So if there's one frame where it moves a little, you need to make sure to fix that. False double boxing is not a very common error, but sometimes people draw two almost identical boxes in the same place. That is not ever valid. The only time that we double box something is for torso with pedestrian and pedestrian with object, and that's just in the 40 frames tasks. Occasionally an incorrect directional heading. So make sure that you have the object facing in the correct way before you draw the cuboid. That's really important and pretty easy fix. Specifically to 13 frame tasks, there are a lot of objects missing just to the right of the video, the self-driving car in the natural dead zone. So it's a little bit dark on that side. And it's really important to annotate through that dark zone. Let me pull something up here. We'll get back into that later. And also people are incorrectly labeling pickup trucks as truck when pickup trucks are in the category of car. And if everyone reads the instructions before starting a task, they'll know that and never make that error and have more perfect tasks. So the most critical errors, to reiterate, are missing objects, missing points or small cuboids, and probably incorrect labels. Now for radar annotation. Yes, this video will be posted online afterwards, eventually. All right, so radar annotation. in the 40-ish frame tasks, you may have already noticed the big yellow-orange dots, like this, with the arrow attached, which you were told to ignore before now. These dots are called radar, and they're going to help you find moving objects. They, especially those far away, that the LiDAR has a little bit of difficulty picking up. So when you see radar points, look closely at both the LiDAR view and the camera view to identify the object those radar points describe. The arrow in the radar dot denotes the likely direction of the object. So the arrow tells you which way it's probably going. From now on, we want you to draw a cuboid around the object if you can see the object in the camera view and there's at least one radar point. And that's with or without LiDAR points. So sometimes there will be multiple radar points for one object, like this. A cuboid can include more than one radar point. And sometimes the best placement of the cuboid won't fully include the radar point, and that's fine too. It's just there to tell you that there's an object there. It doesn't need to be exactly around it. But we now require that every visible object with at least one radar point should be annotated to the best of your ability. So if there are LiDAR points present, you want to use the LiDAR points first for placement, and then the radar. So you can see this car here. Maybe we'll do this one back here. All right. Loosely dropping a box. Selecting car. The radar points are going to show up at the edge of the vehicle closest to the self-driving car. So you can put them right on the edge there. You can tell by the LiDAR points about that placement. Now we see the cardboard boxing here, so we get a good idea of sizing. So that looks like a pretty good size there. We're using both the camera view, the radar points, and in this case, the LiDAR points. But even if they weren't there, we'd still be trying to size it accurately here. And feel free to use the sizes of other nearby objects as a guide for how big something might need to be. So once we have a good idea of size there, we're going to keep moving through the scene, try to annotate it fully to the best of our ability. And make sure to shift the angle of the cuboid if it looks like the vehicle is shifting or turning to the side. Yes, if there are no LiDAR points, but there's a radar point and you can see it in the camera view, then you annotate it. That is the main thing here. So even when you can't see LiDAR points. And see, this is okay if it's not quite in the box. You just want to size it based on it fitting in the camera view. So it's okay if it hangs out a little bit. If it looks like it's in the right place, then that's all right. That looks like the right placement for me. Yep. There are LiDAR points here, so I'm going to use those. And do make sure to always include the LiDAR points, as you normally would. Also, always make sure to check the beginning and end of the scene for frames that maybe don't have radar but do have enough LiDAR points. So you want to make sure still to fully annotate the pathway. You can also hide the radar points by clicking this button to see if there are LiDAR points, to check for them, see where their placement is. but it's only good for one frame. So if I move forwards a frame, they come back. It's just for that one frame. Any questions about radar so far? No, even if there are 0 LiDAR points, as long as there's 1 radar point and camera view. So I'm not sure if that happens in this scene. Let me check. Yes, Silva, that's correct. I'm going to send out the instructions for this as well. Yeah, radar is only for turtle tasks. Thank you, Precious, for using the new nickname. 40-frame tasks are now called turtle tasks. So radar is only going to be in turtle for now. So sometimes radar might alert you to something that doesn't look like it's actually an object you want to annotate, then don't annotate it if it doesn't look like something we would normally be annotating. It might just bounce off of, say, a sign or something. This is especially used for vehicles, but if you see a radar point and you can't see the object in camera view, don't try to annotate it. If you see the object clearly and you see the radar point or maybe more than one radar point, annotate it even with 0 LiDAR points. If you see an object in camera view, there are 0 LiDAR points, 0 radar points, don't annotate. That will stay the same. Yeah, I have already mentioned to the reviewer that these things need to be checked, and we're going to try to build something into admin checks to make sure that low point notices don't come up for those objects that have radar points. More questions about this? Hold on just a moment. Sorry. This is just for vehicles, and it probably won't really pop up for pedestrians. Mostly, you're only going to see it on vehicles, which I can show you. See, we see these pedestrians here, but they're not even popping up. It's just well, a little bit here and there. But we're using it to annotate the distant vehicles. The difference, so the radar points are much larger. They're alerting us to objects we may be missing. It can find objects much further away than LiDAR can, so it's for finding distant objects to really completely annotate every scene. And they can be used together and separately. Lemmer, do you mean for radar or?
How long it takes to
How many minutes it takes to finish every task greatly depends on the type of task it is, how many frames, how many objects, and your ability level, of course. The more tasks you do, the faster you get. Omar, yes, that's correct. No LiDAR points, but with radar points and viewable on camera, you annotate it. With radar point, but not viewable on camera, you don't annotate. And if there are enough LiDAR points present, you always annotate that object as usual. Yes, sometimes you might see radar points for something and you think it looks like an object is moving, and then in the camera view, you don't see any object. So don't worry about that. If there is no target object for the radar points, then we don't annotate it. Okay, I think I'm gonna move on to the next topic here. Just a minute if you guys don't have any more questions. Mm-hmm. Ah. All right, so this is looking weird. Okay, guys. So now we're going to go over annotating through the dark spot. So in the 13 frame tasks, there is sort of a dark spot here on the side of the car that we want to annotate through, because any object that has enough points to be annotated but then disappears due to occlusion or because the radar goes out, if it returns with enough points, we still want to annotate it. So this should be pretty easy and self-explanatory. We find the object here. I can see it in the top left in my camera view. Definitely has enough points. I'm going to turn on the aggregated point cloud. This is going to help me make sure I have the most accurately sized box. I have the top of the vehicle facing towards the top of the screen to make sure my directional heading is correct. I drop the box over it, label it as car, and now I'm going to resize my box. Make sure that all the points are included. All right, that looks good. I have all of the points in there. And marking it as stationary because it doesn't move in the entire scene. Well, I guess that's not a good example of annotating through. This is the best I have. Even if this car was moving, we would still annotate it through all of those frames because it's not actually leaving. That is all for that one. I'm going to give you guys some techniques to be more efficient and accurate. Basically, it's the same method that reviewers should be using to review your work and find errors. You guys should be using the same thing on your own work before submitting it to make sure that you are catching any errors or anything that might slip by and cause you to get anything less than perfect. Nick L shared this text in our LiDAR Annotators channel. It's called Techniques to QA Your Own Task Before You Submit a Task. Oh. I'm just going to go over that with you guys. I can't really show you on a blank task, but let me load one up. All right. First things first. Always read the instructions. I can't stress that enough. Whether you're an annotator, reviewer, if it's your first task of the day, your 15th task of the day, make sure you know. All right, so method for reviewing any task in your own task. First thing I normally do is to go up into the top-down view and turn on toggle label coloring. This is a really good way to look through a scene and know if things have the incorrect label. So you can tell by the color. I can see these are trucks, and I check in my little camera view to see that they're accurate. This is a standalone motorcycle. We have some little torso with pedestrians. These are accurate size and accurate label. And I move through the scene to go check on things. So I need to wait for my camera views to load. So these are all bicycles. But this one is labeled differently. This one is labeled as standalone motorcycle, and that's incorrect. So that's already one one thing we caught from using that. These ones probably are actually motorcycles, yeah. So that is something I'm going to take note of. This is a construction signer board. That is correct. That also alerts me to the fact that there should be cones there, which I can see. There's this little cone labeled, also correct. And we have some pedestrians with object, although we are no longer labeling small personal objects as pedestrian with object. So he just has a backpack, it looks like. That actually is just pedestrian. So this one is unnecessary, that extra cuboid. Nucleus, yes, you need to mark every valid object in every frame in every task. So if there's a label for it, then it needs to be marked in every frame. There is a stationary motorcyclist because he stopped in this frame or in this scene. And other vehicle. This cuboid placement is a little off. It's kind of, the fact that it's sideways is okay. That's just something to do with the system. That's not the fault of the scaler, but it should be down around it a little further. So another thing to take note of. After checking everything for toggle label coloring, my next move is normally to, I'll actually leave that on. Move through all the camera views and look for missing objects. So I go frame by frame through every scene in each camera view. So I would go all the way forwards in this view, and if I see distant objects, I'm going to flip back into LiDAR view real quick and check if there are enough points for that. So the object is way up here. Doesn't look like we have any valid points for it. We're working on a test box option so that you can just drop cuboid to look and see. But continuing through the views, turn around, go back this way. Just checking every single frame by hand. You can find a lot of missing objects that way. After you've checked every single frame for potential missing objects, make sure that you've caught everything possible. You want to make sure that you double check all your pedestrians and see if any of those had an object and you forgot the double boxing. Make sure that the torso width pedestrian box is torso width. This is okay, pretty good. They're a little bit small, but let's say include a little bit more of the shoulder in the side here, but not oversized, which is good. After you check that, you can go back into LiDAR view and move around to check all the different parts. Secondary way to look for missing objects, but a little less sure than the camera view. You want to turn on dense APC. You don't need to go full density necessarily, but turn this on to check the sizing of stationary objects and make sure that they're all caught. When I annotate scenes, this is my favorite way of making sure I've gotten all the stationary objects that could be hiding, because you see how dense they are here. But use this to go through and make sure that all of the points are in every cuboid. check around your scene at random. If you find one or a few that are too small, check a little bit further. See if you're doing this commonly, if you need to work on the sizing a little bit more. Then after you've checked around through the scene on that, turn that off, check some of the pathways, make sure that, oh, you can't stay with the cuboid and toggle label coloring. Make sure that you have accurately boxed these objects, that you've gotten it in every frame, that your box doesn't slide to the side and forget some of the points. Just make sure that you're accurately boxing things. And then, of course, going through the admin checks. This is a really important part of it. So you always want to check all of the admin checks. Some of them are not going to always be valid. Like there are often frames with only, or cuboids with only a couple frames. That's okay. Don't know why it loaded like this. The admin check that alerts you that a cuboid is too large or too small is a good one to check on. Sometimes it just really is a really large vehicle, but it's good to check and make sure that you didn't make the cuboid oversized. Overlap, especially between cars with things like construction cones, signs, pedestrians, it's often unavoidable, but cars should not really be seen overlapping, except occasionally in the 13 frame tasks. And always go and check for the cuboids with few points. That sometimes takes a while to load. Still working on it. And the border points check checks for points that may belong to an object that fall just outside of the cuboid. So it's trying to help alert you to when an object's cuboid might be too small. So now you can see here, there are just a few points. It is torso with pedestrian, so that often happens there, that they don't have enough points once they start getting far away from the self-driving car. So you just want to go through and clean all those up. No worries. Thank you for coming, Precious. Yeah, I think that's about it for that process. And you have that in your LiDAR Annotators channel now, so you can take a look, make sure you're fully giving yourself the best chance at perfect tasks. Do I have any other questions before the end of the webinar? For some of the semi-recent rule changes or clarifications, I just want to kind of go over that with you guys once more to make sure that everyone is using the right rules. And we are getting the instructions updated so that you won't have any questions there and that they will be there every time accurate. Let me show them to you while I'm telling you. All right, so for all of the tasks, pedestrian with object should no longer be used for pedestrians carrying small day-to-day objects like backpacks and purses. It's used for objects that end up clearly changing the shape of the pedestrian, such as carrying a large box or umbrella, or a child, pulling a suitcase, pushing a trash can, a stroller, someone in a wheelchair. Cars with huge attachments on top that significantly change the size and shape of the vehicle, like most news vans, are other vehicle. Construction cones and poles are only for temporary cones and poles. They're for the redirection of traffic. It doesn't include permanent parts of the road or permanent structures. The same with construction zone signs and construction signboards. That's not for permanent signs. It's just for the kind that they have to set out for traffic. As always, car always includes SUVs, minivans, and vans. If you have any confusion about what those things look like, please Google them. You can always also double check in our group channels. Homeless people sleeping on the ground or a man on the ground with a blanket should be labeled as pedestrian or torso with pedestrian, depending on the task. And the cuboid should lay down along their body on the ground. So yeah, like a long skinny box on the ground. And then the new 13 frame tasks categories are light vehicle towing and towed object. So light vehicle towing is something like a car towing an object. If it's something larger towing an object like a truck or a large other vehicle, you still use that for it. But light vehicle towing is a car. And then the towed object goes around the boat or the trailer, whatever that is. That is about it here for Nucleasa. Are you on Slack? Can you ping at Stu? The channel is like this, and anyone should be able to join. Once you are enabled as an annotator, you'll be added to the other channel. But this is a great place to ask questions. Oh my God. Wait, are you having trouble hearing? Can everyone else hear me? Okay, great. I'll make sure that you've gotten all of these documents. Please message if you have any questions. If you haven't filled out the Google form yet, please fill it out. It's really helpful for us. It makes us able to do our job better, which means that you're able to do your work better. Please fill it out. I got very few responses, and it makes me sad because I want to think that my scalers like me as much as I like them, and they want the platform to be better. So the more feedback that you give us, the better we can improve, make it an incredible platform with less errors and a lot more possibility to earn a ton of money and be more engaged with everyone. And it is in the LiDAR Annotators channel. Yep, I think that is it for tonight, unless you guys have any immediate questions. Make sure all the resources are available there, and as always, available on Slack. Yes, I will link the survey right here. Yeah, that's definitely something that we could do. The 50 frame tasks are going to change a little and be better data, so it's a little bit less hectic. And we will do that, yeah, when the time comes when the 60 and 50 frame tasks are more populated in the system. Great idea, Jimbo. Hopefully you guys are liking these webinars, even though we're still kind of getting the hang of it. We're going to continue to do them, probably one specific type of webinar each week. So there's always some kind of option, room for learning and reevaluation of methods.